Snake and Banter is brought to you, of course, by eSportsBet, the industry's leading crypto odds matrix. Right now, you can bet on the outright odds for who wins the major. If you go onto the betting section, don't go to CSGO, scroll all the way down, there'll be outright. You can pick who you think will win the major and get the right odds for FaZe or Vitality or Team Liquid or whoever it might be. Maybe you're crazy, you think Bad News Eagle or Imperial are going to win. I don't think so, but you can go wild with mad odds on them, can't you? And of course, if you want to play with crypto on the site, they have their 50% deposit bonus on up to 200 USDT. So check it out. Right, this is going to be another episode of Snake and Banter, and this is one with, I think, the first ever return guest. I don't know if we had one more. It's possible one other person might have returned, but anyway, Maniac is the return guest. Luckily, I did realise, even though I was trying to get all these like unique different guests, I did realise that since we're going to make totally different points, like there's actually no problem at all having a return guest. Like, why would that be an issue actually if they're a good guest? Could be good to have them on more than once. So we've got Maniac back. So obviously, the joke is on this desk, I'll be playing the role of Pimp, an obnoxious character who maybe does know some things about CS, but will never be credited it by the community, and who's obviously making less than everyone else. No, that part's just a joke. Just that's harmless, but some people will think that crossed the line.
His stream pulls. His stream pulls.
Okay, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
He just gets taxed to shit. That's all.
That is true.
That's true. 50% of it just by immediately.
Right. So obviously, everyone knows the format. We do the good, bad, and the ugly. This one, I actually will say, because I've obviously seen all the topics beforehand, we have got some pretty unique angles there, so there's no overlap. It's quite interesting in that sense. So, Maniac, start us off. What is your good point? What is good right now in CSGO for you?
So what was good right now, what I decided to go for is the YEKINDAR signing for Liquid and the impact he's had on that team. And I was thinking about it just before I came live with you guys, and I thought, excluded the Simple and Zybos of the world, it's been a very long time that I've seen one player have such a deep impact on a team and such a positive impact. And I think it's undeniable on multiple points. I mean, you can just look at their results, and obviously their results have been great ever since he joined. Individually, he's delivering. His numbers individually are extremely high as well. And the rest of the team is just playing well. And they play a different brand of Counter-Strike since he joined. And honestly, I'm going to be real with you guys. When he joined, or when he was trialed in, and Maui and I, we were working Cologne, and he came forward and he did all these interviews, I thought, man, that's like, you gotta walk the walk. Like, great giving all these interviews and presenting yourself as like the voice of Liquid as a trial. I mean, I gotta give credit to him. He's kind of done what he said he would. Like, he's taken over, he's playing well, the team's playing well, you can feel his impact on it. So honestly, good for him. Good for him and good for Liquid where they're at right now.
Going on the fact that he's improving everybody around him, I remember Elige in particular having a huge boost as soon as YEKINDAR joined the team. I think someone posted on Reddit. Yeah, someone posted on Reddit, and I think the numbers were something like a 0.15 rating increase or something like that, which is just tremendous. So if we get Elige back to being a top 20 player in the world because YEKINDAR's on too, this is something that I think a few of us predicted, that it was like now Elige can go second in, and that's just such a huge boost to him. And so I think like seeing Liquid become, in my eyes, purely a top 6 team. We kind of discussed this last time a little bit, Thorin, how I would say that a Liquid are now, you can consider them an elite team, whether that means they're really favorites or like a top 3 to make it or to win the major, different story. But they're a team that basically, they're not going to lose to the random crapper team. Like, I'm just going to say they're not going to lose to like a Fnatic, like that's still kind of on the rise. Liquid are now in established enough territory that the only teams that it really feels like are going to beat them are probably competing for a championship themselves.
Okay. I mean, look, just even though this is sort of reply guy behavior, they did lose to Eternal Fire. We'll just put that there. So they did already lose to them. And by the way, the joke is Eternal Fire themselves were like, actually get that major guy out there. We're not even good. So even they don't think they're good. So I'm just going to put that out there. Secondly, I will just throw this out there. I know what you mean by that, and you're totally reasonable with your assessment of Team Liquid, but I know what that will sound like to fans, and what sadly I had to read on Reddit and all those websites where you see the fan reaction, right? They made it sound like YEKINDAR didn't just like have an impact to make the team better. They make it sound like what he does to Elige is he just takes frags and hands them to Elige, and Elige goes, oh, cool. Oh. Like, he has to still be the top 20 player himself, guys. Like, there's only 2 ways that could even make sense. Either YEKINDAR isn't getting the kills when he runs in, and Elige gets them all, in which case YEKINDAR's just a good entry and not a star player. Or YEKINDAR is getting like those 2 kills like you all promised me he does every time. In which case, what fucking kills is Ellige getting? So that, like, I will just say that's one of those points. Look, it's an understandable point. It's how actually all sports analysis is done in America, unfortunately. When you add a player to the team, if the team gets better, all the credit goes to that player. They don't understand that, like, there are good players there. Like, an example would be like a quarterback if you had a bad O-line or something in American football. Like, he actually was already an amazing player. He just didn't have the players to activate what he did. It's actually why I think on the other side, the example I always give is Config and Astralis. People actually now, in hindsight, were way too harsh on that guy's level of play. Because it's like, who was getting the kills after he ran in? Like, the joke was he would have been activating some, like, god tier second or third in player. But that player ended up being, like, fucking Glaive or, like, Farley or something. So there was no one to activate. So, like, in that scenario, I think people do get the roles mixed up there. But I agree in general. Like, put it this way. The key thing for me is this. On the Liquid side, there's basically no other move they could have had come through that would have had this impact. Because you heard the stories that, like, it's not even if you don't know, like, they've sort of hinted at this, and some other players have definitely hinted at it. It's more that other players in Europe turned them down, I've heard, basically. They did go for some big names, and they did try to get even some of the, like, CIS players and stuff, but I've just heard, like, no one wanted to go to Liquid, or even though, like, you do play in Europe now, there's still the perception, like, you have to go to America for the RMRs and stuff. So, like, people generally just for some reason didn't want to go to Liquid. Maybe they thought it was a dead project too. It's always had that weird vibe around it. Every time it gets bad, people think they're going to break the team up, and Naf and Elise are going to retire or some shit or go to some other teams. So, for Liquid, I think it's the best possible move. For YEKINDAR, it's the best move in the sense that I did hear behind the scenes the big org sort of passed on him and didn't want him, or they just didn't think they needed him, basically. So I think all in all, it's probably the best scenario for both sets of players. The only thing I think is, like, I do think that it might actually backlash on him in the future, though, because since he's trying to make himself like the face of Liquid and he's saying all this stuff about how he's having this impact and they're changing the game, sadly, I do think, just like I said with the config example, I think fans will actually misunderstand that, like, there isn't really an entry player that can do that. Like, we've had this discussion many times before, Maui, where even when we say entry, we normally just mean, like, the first people to go in, roughly. You don't have to literally be the first person. It's not the old days. So, for example, if you go and watch a lot of those series where Axile has, like, the plus 30 and fucking he's not really going in, like, first every time through a fucking wall of flashbangs and just headshotting people like an aimbot. Sometimes he might be going in second, or it might be like they're playing a slow round, like classic Gambit Cloud9 style, and then he just, like, takes a duel where he's jiggling a corner and he has forever to do with that angle and take the time. And, like, they're not really like old school fucking Apex or Maniacs teams where it's like, right, you just go in now, and it's like, all right, I guess I'll just do it then. And then you just hope he just does the aimbot move and just kills everyone without knowing anything, having to know your information. Like, so I do think, like, the problem is this. In the modern day, I don't think if you're, like, an entry player, you really can just, like, force the game to be won. I think you're basically, like, it's almost like giving the assists in basketball. The guy has to fucking sink the shot. Like, all I can do is help set you up and do some stuff that makes space for you. My star players have to also, like, sink their shots and carry the game. So the one downside I see is this, Mauisnake, is I don't know if they're going to go much higher than this level with this lineup, though. So if they don't go much higher than this level, I think it's okay for now for Liquid fans. But I do think Liquid fans and EG fans and Cloud9 fans, they're not spoiled, by the way. They should, if you know their orgs and the money they have the expectation of being constant top 5 team in the world with an outside chance at least to win a major, to win a massive tier 1 tournament. So I'm just looking down the line, and if the team doesn't get much better than it is now, I actually do worry that people will start thinking, oh, it wasn't as good as we thought, or whatever, or some bullshit angle like that. So I think all in all, yeah, it's just a bona fide good point. There's not really any downside to it. I'm just adding some flavour. Right, Maui, what is your good point?
I love how this upcoming major feels so wide open, and I put it down to 6 teams that have a chance to fight for the titles, because I would say that when you look at what happened at Antwerp, I would say we all pretty much thought going into that one that was going to be a FaZe Na'Vi final, or whatever game, whoever came out on top, say they met in the semifinals, they were going to go on to be the champions. So essentially, it's just them two fighting for the title. But this time around, I actually really believe that there's a strong chance it's not just FaZe or Na'Vi. I think it's like, I almost would take the field over those two teams, which is fun. And also the fact that it's not really even FaZe. Like, I wouldn't say, I would definitely take the field easily. If it's like FaZe versus the field, I would take the field. So I think that's, like, a really cool position to be in, because the last 2 majors have been a little bit more straightforward, and this one is going to be a bit more unpredictable. So when I think of these 6 teams, I would think Na'Vi, FaZe, Vitality, Cloud9, and then I'd actually put Heroic and Liquid as kind of like almost dark horse. They're not really dark horses, but they're like the less. They were kind of underdogs among this upper echelon.
Is Vitality in there? You didn't put Vitality.
Yeah. I think I said Vitality.
I think you might have missed it, but okay.
Oh,
I know you meant
Vitality.
Yeah,
there you go.
I think you said the Vitality as well.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Na'Vi, FaZe, Vitality, Cloud9, Heroic, Liquid. That's my
Right, there you
six.
go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thoughts, Maniac?
Honestly, I agree with Maui that it's one of the most open major we've had in the recent history of Counter-Strike. And the reason for that is that the two main favorites or the de facto favorites of the previous major, Na'Vi and FaZe, we have the feeling that it could actually fall before the grand final. It's like if you were to ask me, pick any of these teams that Maui just mentioned, the Heroic, the Vitalities, the Cloud9, if you tell me they're going to be in the grand final against FaZe or against Na'Vi, I'm not exactly sure I would give them the benefit of the doubt. But I feel like FaZe or Na'Vi, for that matter, could falter before the grand final. And this is where it kind of opens up the entire field. When it comes to FaZe, I struggle to know if we're being too harsh, if we have a recency bias that's a bit too harsh because of the calendar and how the calendar has looked in the past few weeks, and we are kind of stuck with this medium rare vision of FaZe, and we're translating that to the major. But we have to remember that before Cologne, they also kind of looked ass in the last. That wasn't exactly great from FaZe, and they still show up in Cologne, and they still had one of the greatest grand finals, still won it. So I'm not exactly sure if we're putting not enough stock on FaZe. I still think they're a big events team, and they have big events player. Rain is the prime example, I think, of someone that can go a little bit average if the tournament doesn't have that prestige, and then suddenly he's going to show up and be the MVP of the last major. So I don't know if we're just setting FaZe a little bit short. I don't think they're as dominant as they were before Antwerp, but maybe we are exaggerating how bleeding they are as a team. When it comes to Na'Vi, this is probably where I have most of my concern, because it's got nothing to do with Simple. In fact, I'm fairly certain Simple is going to have a extraordinary performance once again. But the pieces of the puzzle around him paint a very different picture than they have in the past. You look at Electronics' number, for example, they've only been trending downwards ever since he got the lead. In Lisbon, that was completely fantastic, but we all had the idea that this wasn't exactly sustainable, that an IGL would perform such a high individual level. It's been going downwards a little bit. Bit is also up and down, not that consistent. So I don't really know where I put Na'Vi in that sense. For the rest of the teams, they're yet to prove me they can win a major. It's not something that I'm ready to give to anyone. Even Vitality, which people know I'm the biggest fanboy out there, not ready to give them that. But I will say that the two giants look more vulnerable, and de facto that promises an exciting major.
Yeah, the problem I have with this setup is, like, I totally agree with the overall premise, because the key thing is every single one of the teams that Maui listed off there, whether you agree they're the order or not, but like everyone had at least 5 of those would be in the top 5 or 6 anyway, right? If you take those 6 teams, they all have like a key flaw that could mean they couldn't win the major. Like obviously FaZe has looked a bit whack since the player break. If you go to Na'Vi, they look terrible, and they've only started to get it together online now. Cloud9, like they only beat FaZe, basically, that's it. Like no one really cares about beating Furia in the fucking LAN series or something, mate. Team Liquid, they just beat Cloud9, so they call it that on that side. Vitality beat G2 and Team Liquid. The G2 one doesn't look as cool now, but it was still a good win at the time. But they haven't they won one tournament, and it was a studio LAN. And then Heroic still hasn't really done much on LAN in terms of like championships. So the problem we have right now is just with the circuit. It's, in the past years, when you had those years like 2015 and maybe 2018, when things at times were more wide open at certain majors, that's also because we had so many LANs back then that like you could have a scenario where it's like, yeah, TSM hasn't like won the major, but they've won like big LANs that were like studio LANs, stadium LANs, all the best teams there. They've beaten all the best teams. Like that's when you get like the ultimate one. Like the actual best field, if people don't know, isn't to have like a lot of teams to have a chance. It's to have a lot of champions all bidding for the title. Whereas at the moment, if you notice this year, this is why I think you can't ever overlook FaZe until they're completely done. Everyone else only has 1 title or 0 titles, because there's not that many tournaments. And all the big ones that are the stadium ones, FaZe wins. That's it. There's only the last one that they didn't. And we've all just talked about like some of the, like, was essentially, turns out it was a honeymoon period maybe with SDY. Just seems like it probably was. So I do agree. I think it's pretty wide open. But the problem I have is The reason I'll never go away from FaZe and Na'Vi as like the heavier favourites is because they've actually done it. I've actually seen them win on the stage. I've actually seen them win with the front of the big crowd in the big match that mattered. The rest of them have like one reason here, but then one reason against them. Like, no, they could do it, maybe if they hit the peak, but like I've seen it from those two teams, whereas the others I haven't. And partly, as I say, just because there's not been the opportunity. You haven't played that many tournaments this year, and not everyone qualifies to every tournament. It's not like the circuit before where, remember, you could, like the whole reason people like Astralis got burned out in 2019 is you could play something mental like 8 lands in 3 months or something. Like 8 lands now, guys, is this year thus far. That would be the whole tournament circuit if you qualified for everything or a partner team, basically. So I think it's just way tougher to actually gauge because we're trying to use old metrics in Counter-Strike. It's the same reason I always say when we talk about who has how many majors. The whack thing is we all forget, like, you used to have 3 per year at the beginning. Like, when you talk about some of the people having 2, 3, it's like, how many did they get to play in, like, in the simple era when they were actually good? You had 2 per year. And you went now in the last few years to 1. Like, it just changes the factors. So, yeah, I just think that part's the tougher angle. It's like, I do think I also say this, it's not a problem. Maui's making an analytical point there when he says he would take the field against FaZe. If you know how betting works, even if FaZe was the heavy favourite, the field will always be favoured over them because that's just the way that betting works and how they want to price the market. Because there's no, like, one thing that's very weird about all these tournaments is, analytically, we're all thinking as well of if this team plays its A game and what its average level is, they would win, like, enough times that they would get through all the series and they would win the major. The reason why the favourite doesn't win the major that often is because there's just so many matches and so many different opponents. It's actually quite easy to just get upset at one point randomly. And remember, we have single elim in our fucking playoffs, guys. So this isn't like TI or something where you could just like come back and if you really were the best, you just have to get bounced once. I mean, it almost did happen as, like, Spirit could have maybe even done it at the last major. Heroic could have beaten Na'Vi. Like, there's a lot of angles it could have gone with. So, yeah, what's good is this actually builds into what my point is. Now, listen, remember, I'm not... On desks, I might do a bit of showmanship, but I'll just put all the cards on the table. I do see their points before I write mine. So it will look like, well, I just set it up perfectly there, Thorin. Say, yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to make it shit for myself when I know their points. So they've just made that whole point there. He's bigged up Liquid, talked about all these teams that can win. So you ready? My point that's good. And this is so fucking... Because if you know how I love narratives... I love that FaZe is not considered like the clear number one favourite. That everyone's going to go like, I don't think they're going to win. I think they're not number one. Because you know what I love? That was the same energy you all had before every other major tournament. Right before PGL Antwerp. Everyone now's going to go, you picked the number one team to win. No, you guys didn't though. That's the point though. You guys all said Na'Vi was the real best team. Or that G2 with Monacy were going to get it together and win. Or that, you know what, like maybe fucking like, I mean, the outside one would be some like hit people who still believed in Heroic or Cloud9. Like these were people thought these teams had a chance, you know. No one did go like, it has to be FaZe and they can only one that can win. Like, and also, everyone on desks is a fucking pleb. Obviously, present company slightly excluded, keyword slightly. Well, that's slightly still a lot. Because here's the thing, the second that you lose one BO1 in a tournament, and spoiler, FaZe is like a prime number one team of all time to lose a BO1 in a Swiss system where you're not eliminated, or lose a group stage game in a round robin. The second they lose, you all go on that angle of like, no, they're not quite in the form that I'd want to see though from the team that wins. It's like, that ain't FaZe, homie. That ain't FaZe. That could be a fucking commercial. Hashtag that ain't FaZe. Hit me up, Tempero, whoever the fuck works at FaZe. I don't even know the names of the people. Rain, not the Norwegian one, the other one, right? Because the angle I would go with is this. This is perfect for FaZe because I actually think FaZe is a team that has it all to prove again. Even though they're the number one team, they've won all the events. They probably can't even end the year without being number one. Even if like Na'Vi wins the major, it's going to be hard for anyone to catch them. But the fact that psychologically they do have to prove it again, I think is fucking perfect if you know their team, what they've done in their careers, and the fact that winning things like the major is really like the only goal. They're not a team at this point with their players. It's like the old one with Nico. Coming second means fuck all when you're at the point these guys are at in their career. They're already here now to win everything, including the majors, and stack like the career resume. So for me, the reason this is perfect is I think FaZe as a team, I know people think it's just narratives. Tell you what, you all thought that until about a few, IM Cologne, right? When I told you it isn't just narratives, that is just their fucking like mental character. They are just a team that wins when the pressure is on. They're a team that wins when the opponent starts making mistakes. They're a team that when it gets to a close game, what's amazing is the opposite of old Carrigan teams, they take the initiative, they do the big ballsy play. They just go, fuck it, we'll just gamble. If we lose, we lose. If we don't, we don't. The old ones would be like, we're the better team, so, you know, play safe and just hope we get over the line. So basically, to me, This tournament, are you ready? This tournament is spiritual theatre. This is fucking psychodrama. That's what Maniac doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Don't worry, homie. This isn't about fucking skill, boys. This is about will. So all I'm saying is I just love it because to me, this is exactly what in the movie and in real life I would want the situation to be for FaZe. I wouldn't want it to be like, you're just a shoe-in to win. Like, everyone knows you're going to win. Like, dude, that's where you fuck up like the old one at Boston. That's where like it's the opposite thing of like, fuck, we can't possibly lose it. I want it to be that like even in the playoffs, against any of these teams, think about it, that's the other thing. You guys listed off all the names. Against any of those teams, I guarantee they won't be like some insane betting favourite. There'll be like some near 50-50 games here, or there'll be like a slight favourite over some of these squads. People are going to believe in all these other teams, and it lets every fan hop on the train to do it. But all I'm saying is, if they do win the major, don't try and tell me like you all did after all those other tournaments, like, but they're number one and they won. It's like, that doesn't matter if you didn't pick them. So I think this is a fucking perfect spot. If you know, like, narrative-wise, and also I actually think if you just look at what seems to motivate FaZe to go to the top, because I've got a very quick point I'll make, which someone told me in League of Legends on a show, and it's something I've thought about, but I thought he crystallized it really well. He said one of the problems when you're a champion, it's not that you really, like, are bored with the game, or you're like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll just play when it comes to the final. It's that when you actually do, through like actual like life experience, beat people over and over again, and you always are going to the semi-finals and the final, and that is just your normal reality, you can't always consciously try your hardest. You are going to sort of in your brain, it's like if you thought you had to go to the bus, right, and it was going to leave in 10 minutes, but it's only like a 5-minute walk. You wouldn't run. You go, I'll get there in time. I'll just casually jog along, won't I? And you'd only run if suddenly the bus came early and it was coming in. You're like, fuck! That's like the analogy of what happens when you're already a champion. When you're the team that's never been a champion, remember, you've got it all to prove. You have to go 100% all the time. It's why I actually think some champion teams with potential burn themselves out in the first parts of the tournament. They go so hard on that quarterfinal, mentally and everything. It uses everything from them. So sort of, again, it's a little bit of an out there angle on it. So what do you guys think on this topic of FaZe? They do have it all to prove again, right? Everyone is doubting them.
No, listen, I agree with you. Personally, when FaZe arrived at Antwerp, I had them as winning it on my pick'ems, for example, but it wasn't that clear cut. Now, the thing is, I agree with the psychological angle of people are doubting them. They have everything to prove, which means they're gonna bring their best game. It's definitely what fuels these people. The only issue, or not the issue, the only asterisk I would put to that is that I feel like it's a narrative that snowballs throughout the tournament, and it's one of these situations where every stage that FaZe is going to go through, every match they're going to win, they're going to be that much sure that they're going to bring the A game when it's needed. And I feel like, honestly, I feel like the Legend stage could go sideways. But if they make it to playoff, I feel like that's it. Like, that's it. I don't know who I'm going to put against FaZe and say, listen, they're going to beat FaZe in the best of 3 once we get to playoff. Once it's in the big stage, once everything is on the line, once you're about to write history. I don't know who I would favor above FaZe. In fact, no one in the best of 3 at that moment. But I'm not sure that this hardcore mode, like champion mode we have, can actually kick in the first few days. That's the only thing. Other than that, yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where in every upcoming matchup for FaZe, I'm gonna choose FaZe, but I'm also saying in the history, like, given the fact that there could be an upset in so many of those predictions, that's why I take the field against them. Like, I would say Antwerp, I would have probably pinned them before it started at maybe like 55% chance of winning the whole thing, but this one I put beneath 50% for sure, which is why I would take the field against them. So I think that the way you set this up, Thorin, was really nice. That if FaZe are able to accomplish this major, they've already put together one of the best years in CS:GO history. They what I call the triple. Yeah, just I call it the triple crown, where you put forward or you win Katowice, Cologne, and a major. They have a chance to top that with a second major and a Grand Slam. Like, no one's getting close to that anytime soon, maybe ever again. And so I would love to be witness to what is probably going to be one of the best, if not the best, years for a single team in CSGO's history, because I imagine a new game would come out before actually someone's able to do this again. So that all gets me really excited, but I still just don't know if they talk about how they can ramp up, and this is maybe where, like, I just have a shred of doubt. Like, they've done it a few times now, But I think some teams now are probably using the time off, ESL Pro League, looking at stuff, and it's just up to Kerrigan to innovate in a new way or to bring something like a little bit different, because I just kind of think that some teams are playing just a slightly different style now, and I don't know if FaZe is gonna do that, because I don't really peg FaZe always as like a team that's going to adopt this like Cloud9 style of playing that I think more and more teams are trying to emulate. And I don't know if they necessarily have a counter, because Cloud9 has got just kind of historically been a pretty good matchup against FaZe now. I guess they beat them now a couple times, and so that's something where I'm just a little bit concerned. That's all for FaZe, and I definitely wouldn't if they do it. It's a miracle. It's a brilliant year.
By the way, I will also say, for any other team, I actually think it would also be a massive downside to have both the Major and the Grand Slam, like, looming over you. Because remember, even though they've got all those extra chances, those chances are going to be next year, guys. Like, that may as well be like a lifetime away. Like, you can't bank on those because CS lineups just don't last that long. So, but I also think if any team was going to do it, it would be this FaZe team that's just been able to rise to the ultimate pressure again and again. And also, I won't lie, I am enamored with the brilliant fucking romantic narrative, which Astralis also played out perfectly for me, which is if you are the ultimate choker and the one who always loses, but then when you finally get in the position where your foot's on the pedal, you just put that motherfucker to the ground and you win so much that eventually, like Astralis now, most modern fans won't even actually understand, aside from when people say on desks, like, these guys used to be the ones you bet your house against in the semi-final. You knew they could not win. Then eventually the joke is it became the opposite. Like, you thought they could never lose. So to me, it would just be such a perfect, like, it is a movie narrative, but if Kerrigan at age 32, way past when he's supposed to be in his prime, just wins everything and in the hardest possible fashion with the biggest, like, the great, by the way, how good would that? You've got no majors, then you win 2 in a year, and one's essentially the greatest major ever because you also won a Grand Slam at the same time. Someone just drops another million in your fucking lap. Like, at that point in time, that's why I always say to people, it's actually, I didn't make this line up, it comes from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it's a philosophy everyone in life should keep in mind. The saying goes, because when you start Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, basically it's an incredibly hard martial art. It's not some like karate shit where you could accidentally kick a guy and like, oh, I win. Like, it's just about knowing the moves and the positions and technique. And if you don't, anyone who's done it even like 2 weeks more than you will fucking wreck you. They'll ragdoll you. You won't have any moves. You won't even be able to do a move because you don't know the moves in it. You just learn like blocks and stuff. So basically, the saying goes, because a lot of people will quit. It's a bit like Quake 1v1 in that sense. You just get wrecked so hard at the beginning, you're like, I'm never going to be good. But like, just like Quake, once you get a little bit good, you start to go, wait a minute, there's something here. And then eventually one day you're the guy dominating the guy. So what you do is, the saying goes, when you're the nail, just hang in there because you're going to be getting fucking banged on, aren't you? But what you do is you hang in there. So when you have the hammer, then you go fucking ham on all those other nails, don't you? You go, the motherfucker. And that's all. It's a lesson for life, guys. So if you don't know, by the way, as a quick aside, that's why I go so hard at pros. I've told this story before because I used to just be the little fucking nerd guy with the pocket protector, like, excuse me, sir, can I have an interview? And they're like, fuck off, kid, I'm busy playing the game. So then, like 10 years later, that same player's got like 12 kills in the game, and I know he's all arrogant as fuck, and he's just been out drinking the night before. It's like, oh, brother, I've got the hammer now, homie, and you're the nail, yeah. So anyway, that's just some baggage I have, Maniac. And you're a much more reasonable person. So what is your bad point? What are you going to bring to the table as the bad point?
I know that was a great apartheid, I have to say. We could have stayed on that one. Look, I picked Vitality at the showdown. And I just want to preface that I'm aware this was just one series against Astralis, but I feel like the timing, the fashion, and some of the storylines we see transpire through Vitality are really scaring me.
Sure.
Because I thought that with what they had at Pro League, what they had accomplished at Pro League, moving on to Showdown, with the bootcamp that came in, and then the major round around the corner, you'd feel like the perfect storm was kind of looming, and Zaiwu is coming back to form, and his numbers are incredible, and wow, with Spinks and Magiski's playing better. But I thought that in that best of 3 against Astralis, we saw a whole lot of other sides of Vitality that I hadn't seen in a while. The first one being Spinks actually played one of these worst tournaments he's had.
Oh, don't worry, Mauisnake's desk rose like 2 inches during that match. Got to keep going. It's hate porn. People don't keep going. He does that. Listen, everyone has a player they pick. I've got OC. He picks Spinks, whatever. It's all good. Keep going, Maniac.
Yeah, listen. So yeah, I mean, I was really hyped about Spinks joining Vitality, and I was ready. I was very much aware that we were overrating him as he joined. I knew that he wouldn't deliver as he was delivering in ends. I was very much aware of that. But there was a limit, like a threshold that I thought he wouldn't cross. And I'm starting to worry that he would get into his own head, because the timing of that is the worst possible. Like, it's the actual worst possible to to have a game like he did or an event like he did where you feel like a player is completely lost, like he's 1 second behind, he's 1 second too quick, he's speaking where he doesn't, just reeks of a lack of confidence. That worries me, and that worries that it gets into his own head, because we're going to go to the major, and if there is any world, any universe in which Vitality actually win the major, it's going to have to go through a strong Spinks performance. So that worries me. That's the one first point. And I don't really care. I don't give a shit that it's just one tournament. It's the one tournament before the major. So that worries me. And the second one, what I saw against Astralis is the ghost of the old stubbornness lead of Apex, where you get completely outplayed and there is no coming back. And you're watching this game and it feels like it's speed Kenny Reeves, right? The bus is going, there's no break, and that's it. There's not going to be any change. And I felt that again against Astralis, which I hadn't in quite a while. And I think the timing of that is very scary, because I have a lot of respect for Glaive, but other people could do to Vitality what they did. Granted, Blamev had a great performance, but just he got out cold. He got out cold. There's no other way to say it. So I got a little bit worried. I thought the showdown was a shoe-in, and they would just confirm what Pro League was for them, move to the major with confidence, great boot camp, that's it. Turns out it's absolutely not the case. So as a Vitality aficionado, of course, I didn't like what I saw during the showdown, and I hope this would serve as a wake-up call.
Go in on him. Get him. Talk to this man.
I'll say for Spinks's flaws, he is really not great in my eyes at playing on certain bomb sites. That's how I'd put it. He is so good at recognizing when he should push against opponents. Like, he is one of the best CT flankers in the game right now. He seems to always know great timings, and what I love about when he does push is that he usually does it at a time that's like, say, 35 seconds left. So he knows if he walk pushes, if he starts dying, he's going to give his team so much info that there's so few options left for the T's that it's actually like a good info play, even if he does die. But what Spinks does so badly, I think, and has been shown recently in the RMR and at Showdown, is that when he's stuck on a bomb site and he can't push because they're just like peppering him with utility, or like there's an exec coming, I don't see him get multi-frags almost ever. I see him, like, if he's in an anchor spot, like I think back silo nuke, he ended up there a couple times, or like he was on the floor. Do you remember that round, Maniac?
Yes,
where, like,
he reloaded. They're reloaded.
Yeah, he reloaded on the ground, and then he just gave up his position on nuke, and then they just ran at him, and it was like, why the fuck did you like reload there and not move? Like, you just gave the whole chase up right there. And I the more I watch Spinks, the more I think when he has to hold angles, or when he has to hold his position down, he will try to use like some really lame a really lame off angle, and it's usually good for one, but it's always traded, and sometimes it's just jiggled outright, or he just gets flashed in the face. And so I don't like, sometimes Spinks looks sick because he's pulling off these sick pushes, and it's really like, it's so magnified when you do see him do well because he's getting all these flank kills, so he looks like a cerebral player. But in terms of sitting down and just defending, I wish they just kind of sometimes had a second Magisk, you know, because he's going to lock that spot down. He's going to get 1 kill, stay alive, get maybe even 2. And just to add on to the stats for Spinks, the Showdown was the worst event Spinks has ever played in his career, where he played more than one series, like, period. Like, if he has a 2 series or more event, the Showdown was the worst of all time for him. So that's a horrible, horrible sign, because that Astralis lineup wasn't even supposed to be that good other than one player.
No. I mean, I will say, I imagine there was a world where Glaive was like, right, device is coming, right? Fucking better get the whole thing going. Time to stop mailing it in, right? I'll write these myself. And there was probably a bit of that going on, I'm sure. And then the other thing I would say is, one, by the way, just as an aside, even Etu Maniac, you also say fucking Zywoo.
Dude,
you also say Zywoo.
You have to realize I started saying Zivo in French. My pronunciation is a pure French one, but I cannot do that.
All right, fair enough then. Okay, whatever. He's just doing it for you heathens. You plebs out there. I
didn't even know that was still a topic. It
isn't. I just can't believe you do it as well, mate. Come on, of all the people who keep the faith.
Scrawny and Launders told me why they had to give it up, because they were one of the ones trying to push it also, and they said that eventually the games and the conversation about the game that they just casted was always like front page or top comment on Reddit, post-game thread. Would these guys stop saying Ziwu? And it's like the conversation almost became more about Ziwu versus Zywoo as opposed to actually what just transpired in the server.
By the way,
they had to stop.
Spoiler, that shows why those guys never would have made it to the top of tier 1 without Blast / the online era, because they actually don't understand marketing. What you just created there was a literal meme around how you cast only out of everyone in the world that makes you unique and makes you the topic of conversation. Like, spoiler, that's how I've done my whole career. It's the reason why I'm a non-pro who's like fucking in the mix still and all these years later. So whatever, it's all right, guys. You missed that one. It's all good. And you didn't even do that fucking amazing duo name I made for you, Scrawn Dog Mohandillionaire. I think that's, listen, I don't care what you think, Maui. I think it's stupid.
No, I think it's funny. I think it's so
No,
funny.
because the whole point of it is it's intentionally stupid, isn't it? Like, I'm not thinking it's fire. I just think it's fucking so hilarious. Like, I would ride
Mohan
it.
Millionaire.
Because I just think it's ridiculous, isn't it? Like, I would go with that anyway. But that's why I have a different career. So no, I'm just shocked at Maniac doing that. But what I'll say is this. I agree. Like, I actually think Spinks has shown some key flaws in Vitality that you never saw at Ents, because he was just far and away the best player in the team, and they understood it. Like, that was a team. This is why you know Snappy's a good IGL. He's not an idiot. Like, he might talk a good game about you've got to play for the team, and all, but if he gets a player like that, and you know you're not going to have him forever, you just put everything through that fucking player, mate. You're going to ride him as far as you can, and then if you can, you hop off and pivot when you have to. So what I will say is this: one area I've also noticed Spinks does have a flaw, actually, and this is actually something I think is sometimes timely in Vitality, is he's also a player where he knows, unfortunately, that he has really good aim. And I fucking hate young players having really good aim and knowing they have it, because they play off it. Like, somebody you're basically describing now with Mauisnake is, he's the guy where if he was on, like, we wouldn't be in this particular position now, but let's say he was playing like B-site or Mirage, he would just take the duel every time, and if he gets headshot, the site's open. Like, that's where a Magisk will, like, if he sees you, he's now hiding, he's now making you come in, he's like going on a weird, like, off angle on a smoke, like, he's going to use his brain and then his aim to kill you. Like, someone like Spinks, like, a lot of the young players do this. It's actually one of the flaws, I think, of the online era. They just go for the duel, and in their brain, because they're really good, they go, well, I'm going to win it most times. It's like, most times isn't enough if you want to win every single game, mate. You've got to find a way to shore that up. So that is like a flaw, I think, in his game. I'll also say on Maniac's point, by the way, this is why I actually think Vitality, I won't say they're capped by Apex, but I do think he might end up being the factor. It's not Spinks for me. It's Apex actually might be the factor that stops him being the number one team, in my opinion. Because he's done a good job as an IGL. At times, maybe even did a very good job. I think the lineup he had last year was a joke that he was working with Kyojin. Svi wasn't even in form. I think that was some amazing shit he did on LAN to the performances, win the IM, etc. How far they were able to make it in certain tournaments. The problem is this: unless you're like a truly all-time great IGL who's going to go down in history, right? It is hard to be consistently number one. Like, that's one of the factors. Almost all the great number one teams had that IGL. They had Zeus, they had fucking Pronax and Glaive and all these guys. So the problem I see is this: in teams, a lot of teams do have like the character of their in-game leader. It's why the Karrakin teams would sort of choke in the way that a lot of his teams would, even if it's totally different players. So what I would say is this: I think actually the strength of Apex as both an entry player and as an IGL is exactly that he's an intuitive player. He just plays on what he feels is right in the moment. And what I love, and this is brilliant for an entry player, is he's super decisive. He'll make a decision in 0.1 seconds and just do it. Whereas a lot of other players dick around and that costs you time and you don't make the right decision and you try to calculate so much that at the end there isn't a right decision. You've let all the opportunity go. He isn't that guy. And I always thought the reason why he endured way longer than the other pure entries is because he is stubborn. Like, his whole thing was like, I'm just going to run in. And even if it's literally, I've also, this is a big strength as an entry. Even if I know it is literally Ziwu off in the past, or like fucking, let's say it was like simple around the corner. Other players do fucking peak simple different because they know, it's fucking simple. It's probably good. See, Apex doesn't. He'll just run around. He's known from his whole career. I mean, I've been taught up by all the great players. Like, what you do if you're the entry is, it's not about me winning against this guy. I've just got to get my position, take my space, be the first person and get the info, maybe get a shot if I can. So he'll just do it anyway. The problem with that is, that isn't the best mindset for an IGL. For an IGL, that's what's going to make your team streaky, like an entry fragger is streaky. And it means some days, by the way, when you're reading the game perfectly, you're going to fucking own people. You're going to look so sick that we'll probably all overhype you. But there's going to be that day as well where you are the guy who, the analogy would be like, on a nuke game, you just called like 9 standard outside pushes on fucking yard over and over and over again, and then the team was like, well, we read that about 5 rounds ago, so throw the nades early, like, you're just going to go into that. So I do think as an IGL, if you're going to be stubborn, you have to be like the absolute best IGL. You have to be like the super genius where you just are always right. And there's obviously only 1 or 2 people ever have that status. And I don't put Apex in that category. So that's one thing. What do you think on this, Maniac? Seems like you have to handle.
I was actually thinking about it. Well, first of all, I'm going to give you credit because the example you used against Simple, Apex actually told me that verbatim. He said, people are afraid of Simple. The only reason I can kill him is because I'm not. So I'll give you credit on that one. You were right on the money.
Okay.
But no, listen, what you refer to as his stubbornness and decisiveness as an IGL, I do think he has that. And that's also why sometimes Vitality can have such powerful T sides, because whenever he feels like there's a weakness and he knows like he can kind of see the plan happening, it's going to be real fast and probably too fast for his opponents to catch up. The problem is you have to have the other side of the equation if you want to be complete. And I think a good example of that is Kerrigan. I think that Kerrigan both has the ability to play super fast, decisive, easy first-degree Counter-Strike whenever he feels like that's the case, and that's going to win them and that's going to net them some rounds. Because I think something that is undervalued by people of the community in general is how important it is for an IGL to win easy rounds during a game. Because it's really hard to just hit your head against the wall for 15 rounds straight on the T side where you have to figure out what the hell is going on. If you can have some simple rounds that work, the mental charge you have on yourself is way lower, and you can also focus on your aim, because that's a part of the IGL that's also important. Now, Apex got that. What he still needs to figure out, and I don't know if it's only his responsibility, it's mainly his responsibility, but it has to be like a systemic thing, that there is sort of a on-off switch or like an ejectable seat that can be activated whenever they're going right into the wall. And I think they didn't use enough tactical timeouts during Showdown, for example, which is literally the item, the function that's here for you to redevise a plan or reschedule however you want to play. That's why you use timeouts, because you feel like the game is running without you, you're not on the music, so you're going to change. They didn't use that enough. So he has to figure out a way to pull all the stops and rethink a game, which I think currently is probably one of his biggest flaws as an IGL. And that if I'm Vitality, if I'm the head of Vitality, that's something that I would definitely put a lot of time and effort into helping him develop, because that would make a world of difference for Vitality.
Sure. I would even say, by the way, that it's not actually like a knock against Apex directly. As I say, remember, on LAN, he's been doing this job for like 1 year. Like a little bit more than 1 year. Like there's a reason those other guys are all like, all those names are like 30 years old now and have been in the game like 10 years IGLing. Like that's like the masterclass thing. Like, yeah, a lot of people who just do IGL initially, they might be decent, but yeah. Right. Okay, Maui, what is your bad point?
I have a complaint with just the way that pretty much everybody just refers to the HLTV world rankings as being the by-all end-all for who's the best team in the world. And I think that conversation really was sparked in the last couple of weeks when Vitality hit #1, and so many people realize, wait a second, this is just based off of an algorithm that isn't necessarily taking into nuance or really any results. Like it's just like, oh, hard cutoff Cologne's gone. Okay, FaZe not #1 anymore. Like that's how it worked, and I think it needs to be a little bit more dynamic. But I actually think what would be even better than that is maybe we included the HLTV ranking in this, but I think just like a panel of people that put together a power ranking, essentially rating the top 15 or so teams 1 through 15, and it's got to be people that can obviously keep doing this over and over again, so there's some consistency and they have some kind of fundamentals to how they're approaching this. But I just think that with how the HLTV ranking works, I think it's an excellent tool, especially when looking at teams that nobody really cares about, like like for a team that's in Asia or something like that. I have no idea. I would have no idea where to put them. So the fact that it goes 1 through 250 or wherever it goes, I think that's great. That's a great service. But I also think that it's so lacking in the top 10, top 15, because, like, for example, remember when Maus was like top 5 for so long? I don't think anybody really believed that either. So there's just these moments with HLTV ranking where it's obviously not what we want, and I don't think anybody would have really agreed with it. I don't even think you could tell me that the HLTV riders would have agreed with Maus at #5 when they were #5. Like, other than people that's being like, I mean, the stats say so, so it is. Like, which is obviously just circular logic. So if you need, like, if someone could put together, and why I actually bring this up is actually, Thorin, I remember you used to do your own power rankings. If there was something like that, something that's a little bit more hand curated, or just just taking what everybody's saying in terms of a panel, then I think that these would both serve the purpose of ranking teams so much better. And it could be, quarterly or something, or it could be once every month. Like, that would be end of the month ranking. I think that's something that people could look forward to, but I just don't think as it is, like, the weekly HLTV ranking is doing it for me at all.
Thoughts, Maniac?
I agree. I'm going to give you a true, honest, and intellectually lazy answer is that, yes, you're absolutely right, but I have no intent to fix that at all. In fact, I am aware of all the flaws you've listed, and I compute them whenever I use the HLTV ranking to form any kind of narrative, any kind of story. I know I take a distance from it.
Sure.
And it's mainly, I'm looking at the HLTV ranking for trends, upwards, downwards, recent changes in a team. But and past a certain point, to me, it doesn't matter that a team has 798 points or 803 points. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't mean a team is better than the other. I've never taken it at face value. I think it's a great index for us to have a conversation around, and it is our job and our responsibility to distance ourselves from it and to question it. And yeah, I agree with you. I'm just very much aware of it, and on the daily, I think I use it consciously with being that kept in mind.
Yeah, by the way, what Maniac says there, don't worry, fans. Every actual analyst isn't using that to program their brain as to how good the teams are. They are just doing what Maniac says. They take into account, like this one's obviously, like I haven't looked into the details, but it's a bit loopy in it. So, for example, the way that does fuck us, though, is, like you say, so if you go back to the September 26th one, that's where Astralis is number 4 and Maus is number 5. And it's like, no one in the world would ever think I know they did. I know the Cologne runs had just happened, and that was obviously a major event, but like, no one really would have ever calculated that. So where that fucks you as an analyst is, my comment would, if you asked me about Maus, would be like, look, they're never going to be a top 5 team. They'd be like, what are you talking about? They are top 5. Like, no, that's not how it works, fans. Calm down, pleb. But the thing is, obviously, yes, I used to do a world ranking, right? And if people don't know, that's because there wasn't a world ranking. Like, we didn't have one. It didn't exist. HLTV didn't come around to like 2015 or something. I was doing mine in 2014. And the whole reason I did it was because it was even worse when we had no ranking, by the way. Because when we had no ranking, you can imagine recency bias. Like, dude, if you just made the last final, you were top 3 in the world. Like, it doesn't matter that, you never beat anyone good. You had an easy bracket. Some team just got upset by, you would just, it made the whole thing terrible. And even worse, one thing I always appreciate about anyone who does a ranking is you have to put only those number of teams in that ranking range. Fuck this world where fans have like 20 players in the top 10, and then when they do their top 5, you forgot this team. No, I didn't. Who were you taking out? It's always the question that they never answer.
Yeah.
So like, everyone knows this. If you ever done it, it's a nightmare in that sense. So the problem is, though, I will stress a detail that was always misunderstood about my ranking. My ranking was never my opinion. It was my opinion on the facts, as in I'm taking the facts and trying to weigh them up, basically. So I'll give you an example. Back then, obviously, everyone said I was a Titan/Existence fanboy, right? But you can go back and look when Maniac was in the team and they were, Kenny S was going off. I never had them like number 3 in the world or something mental. Doesn't matter, in my heart they would have been, and if they'd have played properly and all that, yeah, they would. I could only go off the results they had. Like, if they made quarterfinals of a tournament, I can't put them top 4 or whatever. Like, the results aren't there. But what I did do, and this is what the computer/algorithm can never do, is because in Counter-Strike there aren't, now especially, there's not enough sample size. And as you say about like Asian teams and stuff like that, they're not even playing against the same teams. So actually gauge them is almost impossible. You can't basically do what would be the ultimate system. If you want a computer to do it, it must also simultaneously not just do placings of tournaments, but tournaments should also be evaluated on like an ELO system of who you beat. That's why, if you notice, one change I made in my ranking to be able to have some leeway to put people like 8 instead of 10 if I thought they weren't actually, like, they were better than their record or worse, was I looked, who did you actually beat? It's one of the reasons you notice I'm a bit down on Liquid compared to most people. It's like, you are aware they only beat Cloud9, who everyone tells me isn't even that good. So it's like, well, what do you want? Like, you have to actually win some fucking series if you want to be a champion, if you want to be top 5. So I always thought that was the factor. So I will say, I announced this on Twitter recently, but I'm going to do it. Basically, it depends. I might do it as a video series. Maybe I'll do it as text again. I'm probably not going to do my world rankings anymore, because I used to basically just do like a system, which quite frankly, I mean, I love this energy. It's just been my fucking career. There's a great quote, right, that says you can accomplish anything as long as you don't mind who gets credit. Well, all I'll say is this. If you go and look at what the HLTV ranking was like when it first came out, or what my ranking was like, my ranking kills it. Historically, aged like fucking beautifully. Theirs was way worse back in the day. They didn't have any of the extra factors and tweaks. But over the years, after they've refined it, it's pretty similar to mine. Like, if I did my top 10, I'd have had to put Astralis top 5 as well, because the results, there's not that many lands. And if you make it to like fucking top 4, what am I supposed to do? I have to put you there. Like, that's the way that a results-based system works. But if you notice, you'll notice, if you ever read any Reddit, the reason why, even till recently when I published those rankings, years after HLTV's had theirs, the reason those threads were always like 200 comments of people arguing is because they all thought it was just my top 10 teams right now. They never read all those massive preamble. I used to put those insane disclaimers. Got out of control at one point in time where I explained how I do it all. People still thought, and by the way, all the Russian sites used to translate like the edgy one, like, oh my God, he put Na'Vi 11th in the world. It's like, dude, they haven't done anything in a tournament like 4 years ago. So, you know, like, what am I supposed to do? But their logic was like, he's saying they're fucking shit, and like, you know, he thinks like the second best Brazilian team would beat them. So what I realized is this. Bearing in mind, HLTV has somewhat nailed the computer algo approach. I'm just going to do one where it is my top 10. So the point is, now it's exactly where, like to your point, Mauisnake, it will be the best received because one, it is what people thought it was anyway. And two, I would not allow Maus to ever be top 5 in that scenario. Like, I don't care what you do because you have to actually get the wins that count to me. You have to show me in the server that you're good enough. As a result, by the way, right now, I would probably shock people and have G2 way higher than they would. They'd all be like, how can you? They didn't make it. I don't give a fuck about a few BO1s, mate. Like, I care about like what the team structure looks like, what you've done. And then the other thing I would also say, this is a key point that was always misunderstood about every algorithm one. Even to this day, I won't mention names, some super knowledgeable people about CS message me privately, because they know I used to hate on the HLTV ranking when it was way worse than mine. And they go like, well, look at this. Look, they have like Maus 5th. How can they do that? Like idiots. It doesn't, and I'm like, they don't do it. They set the algo and then they just sit back. That's the whole way the algo works. And there's a key concept you have to understand. And if anyone knows tennis, maybe Maniac will understand this. If you know tennis, the point of how a points-based ranking system works is you can never go down for playing badly. It's just that you gain points for doing well. And in tennis, technically, because it goes on a year system, yeah, if like you won the last Grand Slam last year and you don't win this year, you will go down because you'll lose the points from before. But like, for example, if Djokovic is number 1 in the world and in the next tournament he plays really badly and loses in the worst fashion ever, it doesn't drop his ranking. He just doesn't gain extra points. So unless someone else gained the points to go above him, it's why one thing people could never understand on rankings that are these systems is, you know, when someone didn't even play in the tournament and then like, it's like, but they've gone up without playing. It's like, yeah, what happened to the other team's points is the question there, guys. The other team's points obviously decayed. And even though they did not attend the tournament and play, they've gone up in the ranking by 2 spots because 2 other people dropped down. I know these are like really counterintuitive points, but it's actually how these ranking systems just work, guys. So I'm saying this mainly to the fans here, obviously. So then the one last thing I would say on that particular aspect is, this is why I told people for years and years and years, I don't have a problem with a points-based ranking system. Like, actually, if you know tennis, etc., you can literally even finagle the system. Like, if you're like 11th in the world and you just desperately want to be top 10, you can just go to like a few small ATP tournaments that like don't have the best players, win them, get the points, boost yourself just over. Meanwhile, some guy like Federer back in the day, he's probably taken that tournament off. He's fucking practicing for the Wimbledon or something, you know. So you could always, listen, it was always in all these systems possible to like tweak the system a little bit. But I agree. What you really want, because it's actually what every fan and what most of us want, I think, with these lists. Even if I disagree, if Maui made a top 10, like maybe he'd put Liquid higher than I would, I at least would be interested to see his list though. The algorithm one just has like limited value. Like it does certain things well, certain things it cannot do because it is just an algorithm. It's like an equation, just put in these numbers and out it comes. There was no decision making. It just has a hierarchy that's always the same. And crucially for me, I've never seen, because there's no ELO system, any algorithm system thus far that's been able to do an ELO approach. So the real reason why the Mauses and the Astralis of the world will get boosted up is because that's just a tournament where a lot of good teams went out early or lost or were in bad form and they never played them. Like they never beat anyone. You know, they beat like 0-0 Nation and stuff. So that's where a human eye will always have to take over because only the human can really know, oh, sorry, computer, actually, we don't think that's as good. But it is the same, sir. Like you have to come in and sort of take over there. If for some reason you're just a little brokey, not the guy from FaZe, just the guy who has no money. You don't have any crypto to put on esports bet to bet with. Don't worry, you can still play for free in their free-to-enter World's Prediction Series 2 competition with a 10 million USDT prize pool, 300,000 USDT for first place, and they will give you, if you go to the Discord, discord.gg/esportsbet, message the mod mail, they will give you 50,000 DJT to start out with, which is way more than you used to get back for the rest of the year, and give you a little head start to get making some predictions and see if you can grab some of that free skrill. So, okay, right, my bad point is a little bit edgy. It's not really. In fact, that's why I thought about putting it in ugly, but I'm going to put it as bad. Because when I think about it, there is no good part about this particular topic. Spin it any which way you want, and there is no good way. There are 3 possible scenarios here as to why YEKINDAR bought himself out from Virtus.pro. Now, by the way, even there, People have gone so fucking stupid with politics. You are ruining the English language, simple thought concepts, and esports. So when people tell me that, like, YEKINDAR bought himself out from outsiders, that doesn't even make any functional sense whatsoever. How could he buy himself out from a team that is the brand that you have to say to not say the name of the team he actually was contracted to? Logically, he bought himself out from Virtus.pro. That is just a fact. You have not made any kind of support for any fucking state, any kind of side. That is just a fact. Logically, he cannot have bought himself out from outsiders. Why would his contract be with outsiders? So we'll just get that out the way immediately. Here's the other part here, right? There's two ways this goes. The decision tree goes like this. Either he did buy himself out for real, it's just his decision. He did it to maybe free himself to be available to go to a team, to potentially go to a different team even maybe opened his negotiation options. Or he did buy himself out, but he was sort of told behind the scenes, like, look, obviously as Liquid, like, we don't want to pay Virtus.pro directly. I mean, we even saw like the shit like Cloud9 got for so we got to do it through like a different party. So here's the thing, like, you buy yourself out. Technically, you bought yourself out, you're now a free agent, and then we sign you. We were always going to sign you. We've already made this deal behind the scenes, and then you join Team Liquid, right? Essentially, what that is just a way of getting around it looking bad that you pay Virtus.pro a load of money. But the problem I have is this is what I hate about optics. It's one thing if you just do optics to, like, not look as bad. In this case, you're actually trying to look good while doing exactly the thing looking good in FaZe would be bad, which is by not paying Virtus.pro directly the money, you are implying, like, well, I would never do that. I would never actually enrich Virtus.pro and in doing so the Russian economy. But at the same time, you are literally just giving them the money if you are Team Liquid and you secretly paid him the buyout. Like, the actual ends are directly the same. It's just there's one extra stop, which is it went into his account first and then into theirs. Or the other angle, and you can go on this one, this is why I've left it open. You guys don't have to come in on that angle, which is a bit of a touchy one. The other angle, I'm also not a fan of. If it's actually true, I don't believe it is personally, but I'll leave the possibility. If it's actually true, he just did buy himself out. That really actually sucks a lot of the fucking fun out of this move to me, dude. Why is a young player paying a buyout for himself? You know what I mean? Like, these orgs, Team Liquid is one of the biggest orgs in the entire world of esports, guys. If you don't know, in League of Legends, they were playing Bjergsen, who's pretty washed up now, millions of dollars. They were paying something like $7 million total salary for their entire League of Legends team that didn't even make it to Worlds, etc. This is not an org that is, like, lacking for money. If they ever need the money, they will spend it. It's why I don't really believe he did buy himself out. But let's treat it as they're presenting it, that he just bought himself out and then happened to sign with Liquid later. Like, that is not a precedent I want to set in esports. Like, as a very quick aside, I'll explain very, very briefly why I think that's terrible. Because I saw this happen privately, based on what I heard, in MIBR. If you remember the MIBR lineup from Flashpoint, where those players left and they did the Plano and they were going to make their own org, I heard that TRK, who is now back in Team 1, his old squad, bought himself out for hundreds of thousands of dollars using, like, money he was owed from prize money and a salary and stuff. And he just basically did like what I think YEKINDAR moves, which you just say, keep that, and then that's my buyout, right? If you don't know, guys, he probably still has not recouped that money to this day, 2 years later, because his career didn't go the way he wanted. Plano didn't get the team. They didn't get the salaries. He ended up even getting benched from the team as soon as they got the org. And he's now back in old Team 1, the team he was on years and years and years ago when he made his name beating Cloud9 at WESG in like fucking 2016 or 2017 or whatever it was. I think it was 2017 or 2018, maybe 2018 on that one. I think it was just before the Stewie and Tarek left. So basically, like, I don't want that precedent to be set because we've already got this nightmare world where young players think signing the 3-year contract helps them. It never helps you. It always helps the org, not you. You get trapped. They always think, just sign for more money. Don't care about terms. That always fucks you. As soon as things go bad, you're not going to care about the $1,000 extra. You're going to wish you had that clause in your contract to not be benched, to have the option to go elsewhere, to be loaned somewhere. You're going to wish you'd taken that option. So if you're a young player, I don't want you to look at this and go, wow, YEKINDAR's one of the best players in the world. The way he's got on a Liquid, he's bought himself out. Like, that is an enormous gamble. And at this point in your career, if you're a player, you should only ever be making money. You should never be like losing potentially hundreds of thousands in some gamble move. Like, so the point is, you can treat it either way you want it there, boys. You can either go into sort of the murky area of like, did they just secretly tell him we're going to give you the money, it's not a real buyout, or did he just buy himself out for real? You guys see what you want to do with this. It's more a Thorin point, but you can go.
I guess the whole buying yourself out move, I guess where I would see it as bad is just that this is pretty unprecedented for regular sports, and that's generally how I relate the contractual type of stuff to. Because obviously, if a player wants to force a trade, I guess this is kind of the equivalent in the NBA of a player kind of putting their foot down, throwing a tantrum, and forcing a trade, but they're actually spending their own money. And I would say that what's unfortunate is that for this space, we make a lot less money than people do in tier 1 sports leagues across the world. So to have to spend your own money means that you're actually putting your own livelihood at risk. And that's something that I feel like is pretty uncalled for.
I doubt he even had that much money as well. If people go and look at his career, like aside from Flashpoint, he hasn't won that much money, mate. He's not like a guy who's got millions in the bank.
Well, I'm not even going to touch on the whether it has happened or not, because I have absolutely zero idea. I'm not qualified to even have an opinion about it. And as a rule of life, I just shut up when I don't know. Now, what I will say is that I agree with this shouldn't be a precedent. And the only issue what I have is if this is glorified. I think if we consider this as a moment of extreme need and
necessary evil, whatever.
Exactly. What it was that or nothing, and then he had to do it, and we just take it as such. I don't think I'm in a position where I can say whether it's good or not. But what I don't want to do is glorify it and put it as an example to follow for the next players to come out, so that they will actually think, yeah, you know what, I could just buy myself out any contract. That's going to be fine. I don't think that this is a great path to light up for the future.
No, it's not. I got it. It's just that this is kind of the nature of the predatory contracts that are within esports organizations as it is, and it's kind of a symptom of the fact that these players have such bloated salaries that in some ways the org has to recoup those losses or perceived losses when they have these incredibly ridiculous buyouts, like the fact that like the Furia guys signed on for a 5-year deal, or like they just basically have, I'm sure they have some insane buyout that if an org like Imperial wanted a Furia player, it's basically like you're gonna buy the moon for them, like it's too ridiculous. And I think that's something that should probably be in discussions in terms of the future market corrections, where I make less salary, but I have a more flexible contract, so that you guys being the org don't have to put these basically like shackle and chain me to your team, because all of that is just it leads to the scene again just being so much less fun and fluid. And even though we know certain moves should have happened in the past and it would have been exciting to see those, the fact that there's no flexibility beyond a player like having to spend their own money to move themselves, it's like, what is going on with this game? Like, how does that just seem, it's just so outrageous that is actually where it's led us in this space. So I guess that's just bad. Like, that's, I guess, the summation of this.
Yeah, because the other thing I would actually touch on that Maui said there as well is that's the issue, is like, you'll notice this is behavior that the only person who benefits in every regard is the org that signs you. Oh, and the org that gets the buyout. Like, this is just a way that orgs, like, I get that they're also in a really tough spot. They're pinched between the game devs, the TOs, and the players, and everyone else is bleeding the money out, and they feel like they're in the middle, not making as much. Although, by the way, they are playing a long game, waiting for the game to blow up and be worth billions in one day and sell their company for millions and millions. But the problem is, it's just them. It's basically smart businessmen knowing, like, young kids don't understand business and figuring out another edge. So they're making it sound like it's to your benefit. Like, you buy yourself out, and then I could just sign you. It's like, like the joke is like, I'm ripping you off there, aren't I? Like that isn't good for you. That's good for me. I'm making it sound good for you. Right. Okay.
Actually,
go on.
One other thing is that actually, I've talked to James Banks about the fact that, he picked up, or he's like kind of doing, I don't know, like the light GM roles for Bad News Eagles. And he told me like there's just a lot of predatory contracts that come in his direction. And that's why BNE still doesn't have an org. And I kind of, there's a little bit of like, there's a side of me that's like, maybe you should just get one, maybe you should just get a contract for these guys. But then also it kind of goes the TI route, where it's like how Quincy Crew went into the international for DOT. For people that don't follow, that's just like a American mix that I think played the last international, and they didn't ever sign with an org, because why would you do that when you could just play under no banner? You just play as 5 players. If you make it to the international, which is kind of equivalent of making it to the major and getting stickers, you're going to get paid out like heavily, and you're going to be rewarded. So that's something where, in some ways, it almost seems like it should be a route that people should consider for the future. Because if you look at BNE, there's some teams probably at this major that have worse contracts than being freelance, or that are essentially than having no org, and yet they're getting scammed by the fact that, well, it's not scammed. It's just that they're choosing security over flexibility, and that's kind of a deal that they're making, that it should be more on a middle ground. It should probably be make less salary, get like avoid the chance of being extorted for being part of an organization. Like there just needs to be a way that people take less salary and just have more.
Maui, you're
chances to
just
get out.
wishing that people would actually learn how to use the delay of gratification here, which is not something we do really well in esports. You know,
Yes.
like less money now for a better future over there. Everything
Yeah.
is very short-sighted, I think,
Yes.
in general. And I don't want to be the lesson giver, because I think six or 7 years ago when I was a player, I was none the wiser,
Sure.
and I might have made the same mistake. But essentially, that's what it is, like accepting that you have a
Yeah,
lesser gain now for a much better future.
I mean, I'll give you the example just to show it's not just young players and plebs. The Astralis players, the greatest players of all time in that team, the story goes behind the scenes that they sold, if not all, some of their equity in Astralis very early on to the org in exchange for just slightly higher salaries. And if you knew, by the way, what I'm talking about relative to the time period, we're probably talking about a few thousand a month. Like, this isn't the salaries now. Like, you get 20K. This is probably for 1 or 2K extra. They just sold their shares. Now, that is some like fucking biblical shit, man, where you've just sold out your whole birthright there for like a bowl of beans or something like that. That's mental. So, but that is what all players were like back then. Because the problem is, they also just don't see the vision. They just know today and the now, and I'm getting paid this right now, and who knows what my career is. And the young players. So just to show that it isn't just young players who are idiots. A lot of people don't have the business acumen. It's a different skill set, and you have to learn it. And well, the joke is, you'd hope Carrigan was the one who didn't do that. You just finished a fucking degree in business, didn't you, when you were doing all that shit? So maybe that was a course, a module there, I hope.
You know, Kanye said, "Don't look at history, just think about the now." So I think everybody's just taking that.
I'm not really familiar with this Kanye. I only know Yeah, because I
True,
again, just like I
true.
said about Zero, I care about how people want their names to be said. You know, just saying.
That's my bad.
Okay.
Apologies.
Right.
I'll apologize 1,000 times.
We'll do it exactly. I dare you. Right. What is your ugly point here, Maniac? By the way, Maniac, what I love here is he also has some like very predictable angles, but you can see where it's going to go. So, what is your ugly point, Maniac?
All right, for this one, I'm gonna just preface it. We're not getting analytical. We're getting romantical /
Right.
tragic. That's the angle we're going for. And today's movie is gonna be shox's 2022 as a freaking meteorite downfall. Oh my god! Did I not see that coming? Once he got removed from Vitality in 2021, like I have to say, I had heavy doubts about the fruitful move to Liquid. And very early on, I got confirmed that the doubts that I had, that it wouldn't exactly work the way they intended it to work. There would be rolled overlap and whatever. But I had actually no idea how deep this would go. And he that has to be one of the greatest downgrade in terms of players' credit in a span of 12 months. I struggle to find any other players that had some sort of, I mean, I could, but this would be way more tragic, of course. He went from people actually questioning the fundamental change of Vitality when they had this relatively great run at the end of 2021, where people were actually saying, "Oh my God, why are they actually changing? Like, this is working well. We know maybe it's just Kyojin. You know, shox is still doing his work. He's got some clutches. He's got some great games here and there." To this is not going well in Liquid. To Apex now put the entire roster on hold, and shox is free to explore his option. And his credit, like his score, has just go down the drain to the point where I don't believe any European team is going to go and try to get shox above, say, the top 20. I'd be surprised. So now if he still has the grit, still has the motivation, he can maybe go back to the French scene and try and build something up. I don't know if he would. That's beyond the purview of this moment here. But what a downfall it has been. And for a player that, I mean, for the newest viewer out there, you guys might not be too privy or aware of who shox is, but we talk about someone that was one of the best players in the world in CSGO for the first few years, one of the best players in the world in CS Source, has put his name in the game without any shadow of a doubt, was one of the most influential players we've had, and just completely, absolutely crashed and burned in 2022. So that's my ugly.
Thoughts, Maui? You were always down on the shox move to Liquid, right?
I don't think I loved it ever, but because I at some points I kind of wish that they just got some hexed type player, kept it American, but that's for like personal reasons. You know, there's obviously a lot of bias in that. I guess I did like some of the veteran savvy that he brought, and even Liquid themselves said that he was helping them iron out some of their like key game philosophies and like building out decision trees for them. And so what I always kind of said is that, or as soon as I started hearing that and started seeing the performances that shox was putting into the server for Liquid, I actually think I probably said handful of months ago that maybe even on this podcast that I think shox would be a sick coach. No, I think I said it on a desk. I think I said on a desk that I think everything that they were saying about shox was like, he sounds like a great mind for the game, a great asset in terms of discussions and server time, but he's not actually putting in what he needs to as an individual player. And so to see him fall apart on Apex, I mean, that Apex roster, to be fair, I also like rated them pretty low for a long time. Like when I made a prediction about them at the beginning of this year with Richard on another podcast, I said I don't think they're going to be in the top 30 really at all, and they really weren't. They barely scraped through, like they barely touched top 30 if they did. And so I thought that project was kind of doomed for a long time. But I guess the thing with shox is that actually, to reminisce a bit, I mean, he was one of the people back in like 2013 that were making moves and pushing the game's engine to its limit in terms of what you can do mechanically, like running up mid on Dust 2 with an op. And then it's like, now you see people like Surson sometimes do that when they're really feeling themselves. And it's like, shox was doing this in the beginning because he had such a great mechanical understanding of how to play CSGO that it was actually, he was one of the people that made the game exciting very early on. And now to see this fall from grace is incredibly disappointing, but unfortunately somewhat predictable based off of where he was 12 months ago.
Right, okay. I agree with Maniac. The angle here is like, it's Greek tragedy, isn't it? Shakespearean almost at this point in time. We're not just doing the game analytics and the numbers and he hasn't done quite as well when he played this rotator spot here. Like, we're not doing all that shit, right? So first of all, think about what an iniquity this would be for shox if you told him 10 years ago that in 2022, he ends up getting cut by 2 Apex in 1 year. Listen, I ain't been on the desk for a while, Minnie. I've got to save the fucking gems every now and then. That was for you, mate.
That's a good one.
That would have been one of those ones I do on the... By the way, if you don't know, I never give anyone warning when I drop that shit. They have to just live with it and react in the moment. So there's a good one. Also, just not least because shox and Apex didn't really get along for many years, so that would be the ultimate iniquity also to be cut by 2 Apex. And then the other angle is, I also do think shox's career, like here's the difference. Kenny S's is tragic because Kenny S, I mean, he would just tell you straight up, I just didn't have motivation. Yeah, I just didn't, like I was burned out on the game. I didn't love it as much anymore. I could only basically be in like the #1 team, and if I wasn't, then I wasn't really, like, that's tragedy in the sense of like, oh, shame he didn't have the same passion for the game, or he didn't have like a work ethic, or he wanted to do other things in his life. The shox one is really tragic because I actually think he's an example of a player, right? I'll contrast it with certain other players. I am so impressed when someone like Rain can be the best player on FaZe in years past and then be just a supportive element, just be in theory like one of the worst players on paper and take all the shit roles. The one that I always think is the craziest of all time has to be Neo and Taz in CSGO. These guys were the players in CS 1.6. I mean, Neo was the god player. The joke was he used to do before what Simple didn't see it. He used to do that shit where on CT you just tell people, I'm just going to take your spot this round because they're coming to your area and I'm Neo. And he'd just do it and kill the whole team and win the round, right? When you're those players, if you can age gracefully by taking up the supportive role and make another guy the star, you have like, you go beyond legendary to me. That's where like you can extend your career and you can. shox, unfortunately, to me, has never done that. Like, if people don't know, I remember doing a scrapbook episode with Maniac where I actually sort of like, because I knew these stories behind the scenes, I have to like tease them out because there's only so much you can say on camera. And he basically admits, but not in as many words, that part of how he was able to get shox on side when he was the G2 coach was he sort of had to like half trick shox that he's still part of the IGL makeup. Like, you know, you call pistols, Richard, and then like on certain CT spots, you know, you can like decide what setup we're going to do. Like, that's just like what they did to MBK and OG. That's like, look, I know you actually secretly want to be the in-game leader, or at least like the main secondary caller. I'm not going to let you do that, but I'm going to basically make it sound like I'm letting you do that and negotiate until at the end of the negotiation, actually, we're almost at what my position was anyway, but I made it sound like I met you in the middle. Like, the real reason why that's an issue for me is because it looked to me like that's what they had to do with Vitality when he came in the team, and they were like, look, you're on certain T sides, you have a bit of room here, and it's like, oh yeah, and you're still like winning the clutches, so you can come in last on certain rounds. And then later, when they came to the Team Liquid one, I don't know what Maniac's heard, but I'd heard things like that in Liquid. Like, he doesn't like his role, he's not happy with it, and he doesn't like vibe with the team and stuff. So my problem is this: of all the players in the history of CSGO who were true superstars, like contender for best player ever, this is a player who, I think this will happen to Simple one day. Those players, I don't think can just be part of the team, just be a guy like setting someone else up. Like, I think on some level, because they were so good and they were so incredible, they almost have to be played around. They have to be a star. They have to have the say in what happens. And shox has just shown that once his game no longer could like dominate inside the server, he wants to dominate ideologically what the team does, how they play, how he plays, etc. Now that could be maybe to make it fun for him, to make it so he's still into the game. Maybe he really fundamentally disagrees with how people play CS. But the problem is, I think it's made actually his role in these last few teams a bit inappropriate. And it hasn't worked for those reasons alone. I don't think it's skill. Like I think if we could sort of like wipe shox's brain and input a new personality, the hands are there. I guarantee he could still be a decent player. Like to me, what really shows that people are fanboys is when people tell me that like Forest could still be on a top team, but like shox can't be. Like why the fuck not? Like they both got hands still, boys. They're both legendary players. The point is, what team and what role are we playing? Because by the way, on the Forest one, I did this point on my show with Paladin. That point gets way less sexy when you realise. The question is, could Forest be on a top team and make them better? Or are you just making a vanity project to make Forest really good? Like, yeah, if you put Forest on FaZe, he's going to look great. FaZe isn't going to look as good. So I don't know what the point in the move is. You're just doing a favour to Forest. So if we're talking about just a top 10 or a top 15 team, both these guys could be on a team. But the point is, they're not going to be the man. They're not going to be played around. And they're going to have to basically like eat a bit of humble pie in order to be on that top team. And unfortunately for me, a lot of it's like knowing things about his personality. Some of it's just looking at the dynamics of the team and things I've heard from coaches. By the way, coaches are where you get all the info if you want to know the scene. That I just don't think he's ever had the mentality, the mindset to fit these teams. Even though, by the way, I'll tell you one thing I'll say for him, unlike some of the other people who are in that spot, he is really good at interviews, though. He knows how to say the right things in the interview and sound like he's going to do that. And I don't need to be the leader. It's like, on some fundamental level, he does, in my opinion. Just my take. Any follow up on that? Which go to the next?
That's a fair statement. Just quickly, I think you nailed it when what was needed for shox is shift of perspective and how he saw himself in the next project. And I think he had the key to go on for years and years and years. Would he have kind of accepted to be that fourth rifle, that like supportive, reliable element with the wealth of experience that can just clutch, and that's it? And I thought in that role, if he made that shift, he could go on for as long as he wanted because of how exceptional he is as an individual. But if his kind of value or his goal is to still be as impactful as he was in the past, then yes, of course, the differential is going to be way too hard to live through, and he's just going to crash, which is, I think, what happened. And that's a bit of a shame, bro. Yeah, I think you're right on that.
I think, okay, wait, what's the truth, or is there anything behind that French last dance? Is that actually happening?
That was just a joke.
idea.
I think that was
Oh,
just
that was a
Pimp.
joke?
I assume it was Pimp just making like a fake last dance. I didn't see any news.
Okay.
I didn't hear anything about it.
I mean, for a start off, it has existence in there. Who, by the way, Mauisnake hasn't played CS:GO in years and was off in
he
Valorant
cannot play
recently.
right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think that's. I think that was just him doing like if I made like
Okay.
a Polish lineup of like Snacks comes back or whatever, I think that was just a joke.
Sure. Okay, well then never mind. We don't have to talk about it. Pimp
No, it's
just
all good.
making tweets.
Listen, it's what Pimp does. It's what he does. Some of them land.
Does
Listen,
it.
it's a good
Does he does it
conversation
well.
starter. It was a good conversation starter. Yeah. So okay,
Exactly.
let's go to your
Yeah.
ugly point. What is it, Maui?
Yeah, so mine is that I would say that this year, maybe last year included, I don't think we've really pushed Counter-Strike discussions in any meaningful direction, in that I don't think we've really brought anything new to the table. I think it's a lot of, I'd say looking at desks, looking at other podcasts in the space, a lot of it's just kind of recap and then just kind of speculation. And I would say that something that I'm starting to notice with a couple of the tools in the space is that I think there's a lot more out there for possible tendency breakdowns, tactical breakdowns. I will say something I love that Blasted this year was that when they bring Mahone in and then he breaks down around and he talks about like what went well in this one and why it was designed to succeed. But I think that something that can be used very soon, and whether people want to use Leadify's Starcaller or they want to use Gnosis to break down kind of more general tendencies of teams, I think that's on the table right now, and it's kind of up to TOs to start pushing that into broadcast. And I think that another thing that's really strange that I think about, and it's kind of like NBA season starting back up again, and so I'm like thinking of all the things that I wish we had over here, is that like live stats on a like a crawl or something when a game is live, like how many times, because it's up to the casters usually to say, oh wow, by the way guys, just I'm looking at the stats right now, that was 9 for 1 for YEKINDAR on openers in this game so far. Like, why is this not on the broadcast? Like, why are we not just seeing these things to enhance our view, so that like it basically feels like something we end up having to do on the desk a lot of the time is we do mention a lot of stats because there was almost no room for them on the live cast, and it's like I wish the cast just had these so we didn't have to necessarily get all in on these stats, because it's almost like if we're not presenting it, they're not on the broadcast in general. And I think that's something that should definitely be updated, because you watch an NBA game and it says Steph Curry 25 points, 4 for 7 on threes right now. Like, these just little things are so simple, and there are people that should be handling these things, and I just think, like, why are they not there? So I guess that's just kind of an ugly point that I just think the broadcast could be a lot better with a couple easy implementations, and it just doesn't seem like anybody's doing it.
You're absolutely right. I think my first human response on that was to have my ego being attacked, because I feel like we've been part of all these broadcasts, right? But that once that first very basic human emotion is past, I think you're absolutely right. The only issue that I've had, because I can only talk for myself, is like my daily life as an analyst, is that there is always the question of how to reinvent yourself and how to kind of discover new horizons and present things in new and fresher ways. But there's this idea of return on investment on the efforts you put that sometimes is a bit complicated, and I feel like it needs to be a cooperation between TO and the member of a desk or a member of a cast, right? If you have an idea on how you would like to go deeper on a stat or a tendency, or you want to break down a demo in a different way, if you are not there's no legwork being done back office to help you do that efficiently, you might end up being in situations where, like what Mahone is doing, I think I told that to TO for years, that I can do what he's doing, but I cannot do it if I have to watch the entire game and then come back to the desk to sum up the storylines and narratives while I created this round for 20 minutes. That is impossible. That's a net loss in terms of return on investment for me. So I'm glad that at least Blast is doing that. I'm sure Mahone is creating sort of a new position in the space that people are realizing the value in, and will put out the tools. I just don't know, and it's an open question for you guys, because you're members of this space as well. How much can we do? We actors, as analysts, desk analysts, how much can we do to make it better? Because it is a question that I ask myself really frequently, trying to question myself, okay, where are we going with this? Are we just rehashing the same stuff? What can we do differently? I don't know or I rather feel limitations to what I humbly, as my sole person, do to make things better. I can come up with ideas, but I feel like there needs to be some legwork being done from an IT perspective, from an organizational perspective, to help these ideas kind of come together for us to do a better job.
I think the main thing for me is, even though, Maui pitched it, and it will sound to a casual fan like he's calling out like himself and you, Maniac, and everyone on desks. But I actually think the choke point is absolutely the production. It's the broadcast. Like, you guys don't have the platform or the space to do this. Like, in this particular scenario, like what Mauisnake says is correct. Like, because of the way the game is cast and the way the stats are shown, half the time on the desk it is people like, and this guy was 8 for 10 on entries or whatever. Like, that's not really like the analyst's job. That's just reading fucking stats off a scoreboard and telling you the relevant one. Like, in an ideal world, to me, I think esports has it completely ass backwards. The role of analyst is we have this concept in European football / soccer, but they don't have it in America, Maniac. Like, they do the halftime desks, but they don't know this term. It's called pundit. It's not called expert. It's not called analyst. Okay. You are not there to analyze. You are there to be a pundit. You are there to craft a perspective and have opinions. And the idea is, when it comes to the halftime show, you're not singing, they were 4 for 7 on Connor. What you do is you go like, I expect more from, Pogba when he plays in this role. Like, they didn't bring him in for that. Like, that's what you're doing. You're helping the narrative flow. You're building the story. You're taking what happened in the game and you're adding it into like the mix of what we all thought before the game, what we're going to think after the game, what has to happen now in the game. And then the separate thing is, you want an expert and an analyst, but in my opinion, that is a separate role. So if people don't know, this is one thing at Flashpoint I was going to implement, but a mixture of going online and then the fact that we already did 2 tournaments ever meant this just got completely scuffed. I wanted them to have it, Mauisnake knows this, where the whole point is exactly like you say, Maniac, there would be 2 desk analysts. I don't like 3 analyst desks personally. I don't think there's enough space. I wanted a 2 analyst desk, but the 3rd analyst works the game. He only watches the game through a PC, captures rounds and tells the production, I want these 3 rounds, or I want this thing shown. And then the idea is, Either, I also viewed this could be something you could do if there's ever a game pause. You could just bring him in, like, and come on in now from the side. Like, what were you seeing so far? You could do that, but more importantly, because he isn't analysing the game and doing his storylines, he's just watching it like it's a demo breakdown. He then comes in for the Telestrator segment, and that's all he did that game. That would be Yanko, that would be Maniac, that would be Mauisnake. They just do that, and the idea is I would mix them up. Like, some games you'd be the pundit, some guys you'd be the expert. It'd also be a way, by the way, to make the event feel really fresh. It wouldn't just be the same thing over and over again. It wouldn't be the same repeated points. You'd be able to bring a different perspective. And also, imagine getting like 6 different people's like insight on the game in that particular sense. It'd be awesome. You'd get so many different angles on the same teams even. So there's one angle I would do. Another thing on the side that you were saying, Mauisnake, about the fact that they don't bring up the stats. I think, again, broadcasts have taken it way too for granted that the people watching CS are on their PC with a second monitor looking at HLTV live stats and looking up things online and looking at all these different stats engines and going, yeah, like you're supposed to be designing a product that I am sat on a couch, not doing anything, drinking a beer, watching on a big TV. That is sports. Sports isn't about like, dude, imagine if you had to do that in the NFL. Like, there wasn't those stats. You have to just fucking look on his website and say, what's going on? Like, doing that, no one would fucking follow these sports. Only a super hardcore nerd would. The audience that you want, the fucking crowd that goes to the Royal Arena, like dads and kids, they're not going to do that, guys. Like, you have to show them that on the broadcast, or they're never going to get up to speed. So I do think, unfortunately, the bottleneck is the broadcast, because the broadcast right now does want you to have this limited set of time. They want you to hit certain points. The other problem, and I'll say this as well, is there's not people like me who run the broadcast. That's why Flashpoint could have potentially been something different, because when you meet those people, they're TV production people. So their job is get to the break, get this segment done. So if you ever ask them, by default, they will always design segments in a cookie cutter manner. So what they'll do is they'll go, now we're going to bring up these stats. It's why, if you notice on Flashpoint, I used to even tell Monty, if I don't care about that stat, show it on screen, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about what I want. Like, you're never going to derail my interesting point, like some narrative point, like I was making about FaZe there. So I have to look at who had the most T-side kills. Like, if that ain't the point I'm making, but the problem is, to a producer, that's how they're going to make the flow of the segment go. It's going to go, right, so you're going to talk first, Maniac, then we're going to go to Pimp with the scoreboard, and then we're going to look at what the next map. Like, that sounds great to a TV producer, because he knows I'm going to definitely get through the segment. I know the order of what I'm going to show, but the problem is, that will, if you allow that to go above the analysis can never be that good. It can never be freeform, you know.
I'm not going to say when this happened to me this year, but there were times when producers would live in my ear be like, acknowledge the scoreboard, acknowledge the scoreboard. It's like, I don't give a fuck about the scoreboard. Like, let me finish what I'm talking about. Like, just calm down. Like, and then it's almost like just turn to graphic, it's like, what? Just relax. Like, we're talking about something more interesting than the fact that everybody had roughly 19 to 22 kills. Like, that's not that
That's
cool.
also Maui, where, listen, this is what one thing people will never understand is, some of how I've operated, I didn't do it intentionally, guys. I'm not taking credit in that sense, but it's just been a byproduct of who I am. I have had essentially like the big brother effect on esports, which is this. I don't know if you know this concept, Maniac. It's like when you have the older brother who's the firstborn, the parents have never been parents before, so they have no idea how to deal with them. And if it's like a kid who's like rambunctious, like a bit rebellious, you know, they're going to have problems. But it means when they have the second kid, they're like, right, I sort of have a feel of how you deal with them, what you do. And so it means the second kid doesn't know it, but he benefits from what happens with the first one. One of the things I've always thought, you guys probably thought I was a diva when I was doing this shit. Mate, the fact that I never will just accept some shit cold food or some fucking guy telling me to come in an hour early and then I'm sat there doing nothing. Or because by the way, part of it's because of selfish reasons. I don't have to do this only as a job, so I can sort of be like, fuck you guys, if it's annoying, I'm not going to be here. I'll go. I've also done that. Like, if anyone ever tells me that, like, I was ridiculous back in the day. I would just come off set and just be like, tell that producer, don't ever fucking speak in my ear again when I'm speaking. Your job is fucking show things on camera. I do the talking. Like, I would never accept that, Mauisnake. But the problem is, y'all are too fucking, y'all want those gigs. Y'all want to be nice. You want to have a beer with that guy at the after party. I don't even know the names of half of the producers I worked with. Look, that is not an upside for that, kids. Don't try to do it my way. I barely made it work. But I'll tell you what, it gets results, Maui, because all you need to know is, I would have those guys. Like, the joke was that guy at Flashpoint, every time I walked up, because remember, I also would just go off at the end of the segment when I'm fully mic'd up and everything, like, that fucking producer, and he's just listening the whole time. Every time I walked up those stairs at Flashpoint, that producer guy was like Pepe sweating in case I was going to come over, like, oh God.
Monka S.
I know, exactly. He's just like, what the fuck?
Just
Whatever.
terrified.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Oh God.
But now it's your turn. You have to do it now, mate, if you want to get those changes. The real problem, like I was saying, though, is it's like the broadcast is... It is another problem. This is a downside of our industry. We don't have like 3-year contracts. So unfortunately, they're not going to build you a special segment, Maniac, where you do all this thing every week, because they also don't know if they've got you for the next event. Maybe the negotiations go differently. It's a different guy. So they do kind of want it to be plug and play. Like, if you're not there, they're going to put Pimp in. If Maui's not there, they're going to put, I don't know, fucking Dinko in or something. They're going to put someone else in that spot, and he's going to do the same segment in their mind. Now, the reason that's annoying to us is we all see ourselves as individuals who have a totally different perspective on the game and all that.
Yeah, I think it's still a way as a pundit, as an analyst, as you say, to kind of guarantee your future and legacy, to actually work towards changing these things and be innovative, because that's something that people notice, right? It's something people notice. You come in with a fresh idea, fresh take, you see things a little bit differently, you push for it. It's just that I think you have to choose the hill you want to die on. You want to pick your battles, and you cannot just fight for every broadcast about every graphics that's coming up. It has to be some sort of a long-term negotiation. Yeah, I agree.
And I'll just say, look, this is just like a petty side shot. It's not really even that relevant. But I will just say, you all do, because you read too much Reddit, believe all that shit that they just want tactical breakdowns. So no one remembers a single tactical breakdown ever in the history of Counter-Strike. No one even remembers when Astralis did the amazing one against Fnatic on Inferno, like whatever, Chicago. No one remembers those breakdowns, right? Even though you're putting all this effort in, you're taking notes, you're doing the whole game. Tell you what, though, you'll remember an amazing rant. They'll remember a fucking funny moment. They'll remember an entertaining thing. So I will just say, esports will always be torn in CS between those two things, because we're all pretending we're Dota and that we're all just breaking the game down as analysts. But like, I feel like CS, look at Twitter, mate, it's just shit posting. It's just people saying stupid shit. How could G2 be good if they went in the RMR? Like, that's what CS is, mate. The joke is, you know, they say HLTV is where smart people pretend. No, that's just CS in general. CS is people who are dumb pretending to be smart and going, the tactical breakdown of the way that's speaking. Shut the fuck up. You just hate the guy. That's the truth. So here's the last point. Go on. Did you have one fast point?
Yeah, well, just that, like, I think Yanko and I did a couple, like, Skybox breakdowns or whatever during Pro League, but then, like, the most viewed clip, I think, from the desk was me doing an Obama impression or some shit like that. It's obviously humor that wins out of the end.
There you go, exactly. Yeah. Right, for my ugly point, I've got a very subtle point to make here, and I'll just open the floor. Basically, it's that the conclusion of Richard's last set of articles about match fixing are now also playing out with this recent, like, speculation of, like, did this former ESIC guy find that people are match fixing and, like, fucking doing all betting and stuff? Here's the reason why people don't know what an insane black pill it was that Richard basically wrote that article, where the gist of the headline was, like, you can never stop match fixing. I know everything about match fixing and what's going on, and it will never be stopped. In fact, it's getting worse. Goodbye, I'm leaving esports. Like, that was one of the craziest black pill headlines I've ever read. It was like, Jesus, that's like the sheriff going, you know what, guys? I tried to keep law and order, but actually the mobs here, they're going to run the town, and the second I leave, they're going to absolutely destroy you all. So anyway, I'm off. So see ya. It's been real. Having it. Good luck. Good luck. Like, that's a really black pill moment. It's even worse, because what happened with this match fixing thing with this Russian guy who's written it all, it's been translated, etc., where he's making these accusations, is he himself made a point when Richard interviewed him, this is in his recent Discerto articles, that is even more crazy, but he's right. And if you understand how evil this premise is, you'll know why you never will stop things like match fixing, illegal betting and cheating. Here's the real problem. Is because they use so many technological components now to level up. They use crypto to transfer the money so you can't track it. They do things like have it go through a few different people. They do things like not everyone involved in the game is the one match fixing. They do things like they're not match fixing just the obvious outcome. They're match fixing a thing that happens on a round or a gun purchase, or who gets more T-side rounds, or who wins one map of a series but not all the maps. Because they're doing all these really complicated aspects that make it harder and harder to nail down, like, evidence that in, like, court you could show, like, this person absolutely did this. Because remember, this is a key detail people always misunderstand about the legal system, at least in, like, Anglo-Saxon countries. The premise of the entire fucking Western civilization is the notion that when you go to court, it's not that you might have done it, it's that you definitely did it. If you definitely, the judge will actually inform the jury, unless you think, like, this person, beyond reasonable doubt, did it, you must acquit them. You are actually never found innocent by a court, by the way. What you are found is not guilty, and that is very crucially phrased. They even tell you, even if as the jury, you think he did it, even if you think it's likely he did it, if you don't think the evidence is there and it's not been established that he definitely did it, you must acquit. You must say not guilty. And that's actually the basis for, in theory, how the system works. That's why you can't just be, like, put into endless lawsuits and just wrecked eventually, like, by random luck, basically. So the problem is this. this. What the guy said to Richard when Richard was sort of saying, like, you haven't really established any evidence, though. Like, you won't give me any hard evidence. You're just making these claims. You're saying, you know, you worked with E6, so I'm supposed to trust that as, like, credibility. But I, essentially, as a journalist, Richard's sort of saying, look, unless I can see the hard evidence and it proves these dates, these people this way, I'm not going to say it's match fixing and I'm not going to wreck these people. What the guy's response basically was like, I think your standards of evidence are too high if you want to catch these people. Here's the downside, and it's going to be the end of my rant. He's right. You know, on the really black pill, he is right. If you actually want to just catch all these people, you would have to do it on the basis of, like, I'm pretty sure he did it, but we can't actually nail it because we're never going to nail them at this point. There's too hard a standard of evidence to maintain, and I don't think you can nail the whole chain. And even if you got one or two people, it would be an eye by power one where they just slipped up and they did it in a sloppy way and they weren't smart about it and they leaked it. Remember, it was even the fucking leaked chat logs that nailed the eye by power guys. The evidence was there, but the motive wasn't established to make it seem outrageous. So what I'll say very quickly is, if you've never watched the classic Orson Welles movie with Charlton Heston, Touch of Evil, this is the plot of that movie. Now, luckily, all the people watching this fucking show are never going to watch this movie anyway, and Maui's still working on 1950s movies, so he hasn't got to this one yet because it's in the 60s, but, well, I think it might be like 1957 or something, but basically, the premise goes like this. Orson Welles plays this amazing character who actually, it's not when he was actually fat himself, it's actually prosthetics, it was actually when he was still a young man, but he plays this incredible character called, like, Hank something or other, who's like an old, like, classic, like, cop who's like, you know, like the cop where they have like the fucking stains all on the shirt, but they're just like, they live the fucking job and they're like got the old like hat on and the raincoat. And basically the premise of the movie is this. This guy is a corrupt cop, but he's not corrupt in the sense that he's just being paid off and he's fucking you over. He's corrupt in the sense that if he knows you did the crime, and in this movie, the clever thing is, he has like sort of like a psychic element. Like he has like an old leg injury that like tingles when like he knows he's right about something. And that's like, you know, his intuition tells him like, I'm on the right trail. And the premise goes, he's just a guy who's seen the legal system fail and be corrupt. So what he's decided is, if I know they did it, like for real, I know they did the crime, but I can't prove it, I'll just plant evidence and arrest them. There we go. Problem solved. Now, the problem with that is, you can see why I'm opening this up as the ugly point, not the bad point. It's not that, like, he's wrong. He's right. There are certain times you will actually know the person did it, but you can't nail them. But is it better for society that they go free? That's, by the way, like a 1,000-year-old ethical fucking question that starts a debate. So the problem I have is that Richard and this guy are both right. Richard is the kind of person where you must do it by the book. Otherwise, we can't know that it was totally correct that this person's guilty. But the problem is the match fixer guy's also right. If you want to just catch as many scumbags as possible, in a fucked up sense, you have to also sort of just do it. Well, it's like cheating. You can kind of know when people were cheating, even if you didn't catch the executable on their PC or know how they did it. You can just sometimes know they were. A certain French LAN where someone had 98% headshot rating or whatever feels like an example there. I don't have any logs or demo, but I tell you what, I'm pretty sure. Got into my head, I know what answer I'm giving there. So I'll open the floor on this one, because as I say, I think it's just ugly. I don't think it's good or bad. It shows what the fucking world's like, boys. So what do you think on this topic?
This is kind of it's kind of the problems when I think about it. It sends me down like a loop, like a rabbit hole, like a loophole, like the infinity. That's how I see it. I struggle so much to have a fixed opinion, because when you open up the philosophical door to not having to follow the rules, to punish someone or catch someone because you are so sure that that person did it, right? Just from a philosophical standpoint, you kind of go from the assumption that the person who has the feeling isn't wrong, is perfect. And I think that's the flow of the entire philosophical idea, is that if we allow someone or some entity or some things to not follow the rules at times where they are sure and certain, and there is an actual point to be made that maybe the perpetrator or the criminal or whatever would not be found following the rules because of how technically advanced they are or how crazy their plot is.
The classic example would be like a mafia person. You know that guy's in the mafia,
exactly.
But maybe you couldn't nail that he sent the command or something, you know.
Exactly. But the problem is, and this is the issue, what do, we as a society with a capital S, what do we do if we are wrong? Like, what is the fallback on deviating from the rules to catch someone, and then eventually down the line you realize that you're wrong? What is the next step in that kind of decision tree? Because I think that's the problem. Like, we assume the perfection of the accuser or the judge and executioner, right? And there are definitely ways, there are definitely moments where I think all as human beings, we've all dreamed of, bypass the whole freaking having to prove something because that person definitely did it. That's it. We just go straight to the punishment. But what happens when we're wrong? Like what have we allowed to happen?
What happens is that the person doesn't have the privilege to play a video game. Like, that's it. I mean,
but
if you want to
very moral and philosophical for a second. That's the whole conversation. Yeah.
He meant it's a wider abstract point, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean if I want to put this down to like what I would actually just carry out moving forward for these kind of issues is that someone would probably need to create an abstract or basically an essay or whatever, just to say this is their point. Here are their citations for the sources. They need to have an ESIC panel of people, maybe 7 or so, an odd number, that can pass judgment based off of whatever is being put forward in terms of a case. And then what tournaments can do is that they can leave this up to this panel, or they cannot, because ESIC has kind of in some ways, like, it's not like they have the most stable position in this space anyways, and I don't think everybody cares what they say anyways. But if a TO wants to subscribe to the ESIC guidelines and they want to actually try to entrust them to be the ones that can pass judgment on these kinds of people, then they can do that. Like, ESIC could just put that together, and then someone like, what's the guy's name? I mean, whatever, the guy that came forward with this kind of information, is it Yarabu or something?
Like
Yarabu. No idea.
Yarabo. If he can put together a solid case of evidence against somebody, and then ESIC can make that judgment call, then TOs can say, we accept this like certain sector of what you guys are doing in terms of these kind of judgment calls, and we're gonna choose not to do that. And if it were up to me, if I were like CCT, or I were Home Sweet Home, or I were these lesser TOs, I would say we do follow these restrictions put in place by ESIC's judgment crew, and like maybe ESL does not do it. Maybe Blast does not do it because they want to make sure it's without a shred of a doubt evidence that can prove these things. But if you're like a TO that's kind of on the fritz or kind of like with questionable tournaments taking place, I think it's in your best interest to do this to try to save face, that you would subscribe to these bans that are a little bit lighter. It's like kind of more like, instead of the red card ban from ESIC would be, do not let this person play anything for the next X amount of years. But the yellow one is like, the yellow card ban would be like, just, you can't play in tournaments if these tournament organizers think that our judgment panel has actually pushed a decision forward that says this guy can't play. I think that's just where I'd move forward with this.
By the way, there even is actually like a slightly different area. It's specific to esports that isn't the case in like a legal battle, which is that Valve, as the IP rights owner, has godlike power. They can do whatever they want. They can kick you. By the way, I don't know if people understand this. You know how Gabe Newell famously just came on Reddit one day during like the Shanghai Major in 2016 and was like, James Harding is an ass. He is fired. Valve can do that at any moment, capriciously, with anyone they want in CSGO. They could just come in tomorrow and go, right, Mauisnake doesn't ever work at an event in CSGO anymore. shox isn't allowed to play anymore, and FaZe Clan has to shut down their CSGO team. They can do all those things. No one can stop them. That's how it works. The only way you could actually stop them, by the way, and this is why it would be so difficult, would be literal legal means, like the Yampy style move of like, I'm going to have to take you to court and try and sue you for the fact that like you've unfairly done this and you've limited my livelihood. Like, you'd have to do some really extreme things. So Valve, by the way, is actually the one who could do this. They could just decide, I'm just banning people I think are a suspect. And as you say, Mauisnake, the angle they would claim to make it not seem as bad is like, I'm just stopping you playing a video game, aren't you? I'm not really putting you in jail for life, like a real legal case, etc. The problem is, though, this is why I can see why Maniac would be someone who's tortured by this, because I think the same thing. On the one hand, part of me I hate it when I know people are scumbags and got away with certain shit and did some things that were dodgy. But the problem is, I do subscribe to the Voltaire line that it is better to potentially... it is basically better to potentially let a guilty man go free than to potentially like imprison an innocent man. Like, I can't live with the latter one. Like, look, the world's going to have fucked up people in it anyway, but I can't live with the idea that like we get it wrong one time and that guy didn't really do it and it just looked really bad. And there was and maybe even, by the way, it's a conspiracy. Maybe people made it look bad. And because there was no evidence, people just put things in a way where it seemed like it was that way, like a movie where you haven't seen the scene from that person's POV and suddenly it all changes when you know what happens, like Tarantino style. Like, that would be the torture for me. I wouldn't choose that. And I have to say, the reason it's easy for me is because that's how I've lived my life as a journalist. It's how Richard does it. One of the reasons Richard has a 100% accuracy rate, not success, sometimes what he said didn't happen, but 100% accuracy, is because he follows certain protocols. And that means when he has a story, the others don't do this for the other websites. They have a story they know is true. They just didn't get the second source. They didn't get any extra confirmation. They just heard some really legit rumors, so they just put it out there because they want the story. If you do that, the problem with that is, like Maniac says, at some point in time, you will be fallible. And I'll give you the example. Say someone fucks with me. So I'm probably going to do a video on, but not on EG. I'm doing one on YEKINDAR soon. Right? I could easily go with like the angle, like they disrespected me. So fuck it. I'll put anything I've heard in there, anything dodgy. No, if you do that, then there's going to be the time you're wrong. And when someone does come to you and feed you the wrong info and someone sets you up, and you will actually be an instrument of injustice if you do it in that way. So I think that's the problem for me. Is like, I know what the guy meant. The guy was basically sort of telling you, and spoiler, this is why they won't do what you said, Maui. The implication by the fact he's an ex-ESIC employee is like, ESIC couldn't catch these people, and what we have isn't good enough to go off to actually use the ESIC body to ban people. So what he's sort of doing is, because I used to work for them, I'm going to give it all to these journalists, like go and fucking expose them, show that these guys are scum and they're all doing it. The problem with that is, and this is the main issue, we don't know this guy from Adam, as we say in English. Like, what if this guy just hates Copenhagen Flames? That's the obvious example, by the way. What if for some reason he just had some dealings with them, or he bet on them a bunch of times when they lost, and he's like, this is bullshit. Like who? No one can know. And the problem is, you are basically trusting that he is credible. And even, by the way, even if it's Richard Lewis, I wouldn't put someone's life on that, someone's career on that. Like, I have to know the evidence. I have to know the protocols.
Okay, well, I mean, the other side is Voltaire also said that they were barbarians, but they founded cities and they made canals. So maybe you do have to go on the other side. Maybe you have to be a little bit ruthless sometimes.